So if you have a non-diverse body of engineers that come from only one background, they're gonna be able to solve problems that come from their own background, but they're not gonna holistically solve a problem that like benefits everybody. It's gonna be focused and from the perspective of one side, but that's not the reality.
So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the B-Xcellent podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brandon Harrison Smith. Today, I have a special guest with me. I have an upcoming doctor, right? Mr. Bereket right here. So we were having a discussion prior to this episode about your last name. So everybody understands the story of your last name. Can you go talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I guess it's not just mine as well. It's like everybody in Ethiopia. So the way we do things from my country is when you have a child, you don't give him a last name. So you just name your child and the name just goes after you. So for example, my dad's name is Daso and that became my middle name here.
I see.
And my grandfather's name is Bekele or Bekele.
Bekele?
Bekele, yeah.
Okay.
There's a famous runner who has the same last name as me, but that is just his grandfather's name.
I got you.
So it's just your first name gets stacked onto the long list of names that came before you. So that's essentially how we do it. But when you move to a new country and they have this system, you have to just truncate this at the end.
Yes, and you got to switch it around.
Exactly.
All right. No, that's pretty good.
So
I'm learning something new. So hopefully that's what this episode, that's what the B-Xcellent episode is about, or podcast is about. It is about, opening the door to understanding about academia, different cultures, different perspectives of how to become successful within that regime. So before we get into your research and, we get into some really cool topics, I'd like to know a little bit more about you. So you come here from, you said Ethiopia?
Ethiopia, yeah.
So let's just talk a little bit about your upbringing. Let's talk about STEM and being raised in Ethiopia. Like how did you become involved with STEM?
So since I was really young, and whenever they give me toys, I used to just break them apart and see how they work. And I never really had a working toy after a day.
Yeah.
So, and then that kind of annoyed my parents. And instead of giving me toys that work already, they started buying me toolkits. There's this famous one called Mechanics that used to be back. So they used to just give me those things or Legos or something like that. So something to build with and you can easily take it apart. And you can build really cool things like a car and there's instructions on it. And then since a young age, I've been doing that. And then I had a really curious, and then this is also fostered by, my parents, my upbringing. So my dad is really into school. He was a teacher at a certain point in his career. And he gave us homework sometimes. And so it's been part of our, it's been part of school has been part of me since I was really young. So it was not really, and then although I like all the fields of school, since I like to know how things work, I gravitated towards STEM and yeah.
So your dad's a teacher. What kind of teacher is he?
No, he wasn't. So
he was a teacher.
So I think he had a forced service as a teacher for. So in Ethiopia, I think during the communist era, everybody had to teach.
Oh, okay.
Everybody that graduates, they send you over to some area and you have to teach for a certain time. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I think that's actually a nice policy. Instead of having to go to war here, everybody has to teach.
They sent you to war too. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
I think it's I think it's an important skill to learn how to teach, though it depends because some people are like, this is the way to do it. Just do it this way. Or sometimes you get lucky and you get a good teacher. All right. So that's cool. So you like taking things apart. I definitely can say I was definitely a part of that group. My parents, they just yelled at me instead because I was breaking a lot of things, important things like VCRs and DVD players, because I just wanted to know, how it worked, and
yeah.
All right. So where'd you go to undergrad?
So I actually came here from my undergrad. I went to school in a small school. I mean, not small. Like it's not well known, but it's a big enough school in that region. It's called Northern Kentucky University. And so yeah, I did my degree in chemistry actually there. So I even started out from a different. I ended up doing chemistry, but I
Actually, same
started
here.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I went to Cheney University and
oh,
I
okay.
did my chemistry degree there as
Oh,
well.
wow, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it's different. So,
Yeah.
yeah, speak to that differences.
Yeah, I think the way we formulate the problem is different, and
Yes.
the things that matter are different. So, as an engineer, you you are expected to anticipate things. You're more of an anticipator rather than a discoverer. So you're trying to so when you look at a problem, whether it's like applying something or uh just making it work, that's how you focus on. So like, how do I understand it enough so I can make it work perfectly, and then in the future anticipate any other problems, issues that could happen, and then model it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in engineering, you 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 take a different perspective for tackling challenges and problems. Just a different route. And sometimes you work forward, sometimes you work backwards. You actually attack the problem from like a lot of different angles, which is not necessarily, from my experience, was common way of thinking about tackling chemistry problems.
This might be like, so as a chemist I can say this because but like one of the engineers in my lab was explaining to me like what's the difference between a chemist and a chemical engineer. So if you ask a chemist what to build me a cell, he'll bring two beakers, puts the ions into different beakers, builds an ion bridge, and then so he connects it, and then like that's how you make a voltaic cell. But with an engineer, he will design the battery that we use in day to day life, which is more applicable because it like he'll design the transport questions, the casing and the type of geometries that you need to fit it in a.
That's a very, very fair point. I could see it in my mind. I was
Yeah.
like, yes, like being on both sides of those things. I could see like getting the beakers and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Like that's fundamentally how I learned about a cell. But from an engineering perspective, it's a little bit different how we're tackling that challenge.
Exactly.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So then you came here for your PhD.
Yeah, so right after I finished during COVID, so I didn't get a graduation. Yeah, so after I
So this
graduated,
one's going to be a big one.
yeah, actually, I'm doing a pre-celebration. So I'm also, so you can do this if
Okay.
you're in a PhD program. You can,
Okay.
if you once you're done with your courses, you can get your master's.
Yes.
So that's what I'm doing this May actually.
Oh, okay.
Is coming in. We're gonna do a celebration just to make up for the undergrad one.
Oh man, I
Yeah.
want to come just to
No,
be a part of it.
No, definitely. Like, yeah, we're trying to plan out the details this weekend,
Okay, okay.
and I'll definitely let people know if we're gonna do an actual thing or we're gonna keep it low key and not even. But yeah, so we're gonna do that, and then the PhD. I think I'm promising some people tears. So
Oh
so
wow,
there's
wow.
gonna be a
Okay.
tear. Hopefully, yeah, it's gonna be a big one.
Yes, as it should be.
Yeah.
As it should be.
Yeah.
Okay. So you did chemistry, then you came here and to the chemical engineering. All right. I guess the famous question, why Purdue?
Why Purdue? There's plenty. Like, one of the reasons is my advisor was an alum. So one of my undergrad research advisors, he was also from Ethiopia, and he did his chemistry PhD in like the chemistry department here, and he talks highly about it. He is also the one that wrote me one of the recommendations letter. Plus, they gave me a fee waiver. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm like,
Anything to save some money.
and then I applied, and it just gave me the energy that like this place knows what they're doing, and like they were organized about their events. Like, their response to the application was quick and direct, and
Yeah. That's one thing I learned about Purdue. When they want you, they'll get you.
yeah, it's like and then you get to go visit different places, right? So I went on different visit weekends, and the Purdue one was the last one before COVID. because after that, like, we couldn't go. We was locked down. But it was literally the last one, and it was the best one. Like they treat you like a D1 player, basically. Like they're trying to like recruit you. They have the week, you meet the different professors,
I got you. I got
and
you.
you get taken out to dinner, and it was nice. And I really enjoyed. I never really saw myself living in a small town, and I was like, that was the biggest drawback. But I was like, you know what? It's okay. I can tolerate this. And then I like, I just made my decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So before I get to the research here,
Mhm.
what was that? You talked about not thinking about being in a small town or area where not a big city or whatever. I guess what was that transition like?
This is probably the most common theme you'd hear.
Mm.
It's the fact that like it's not diverse. And by that I mean, like, when you have a big city, like, you're gonna have people from different countries, different, so you're gonna have different food, and that's, I like food, different food.
Yes,
Yeah, that's a
absolutely.
big thing. Like,
Absolutely.
different people that are interested in the stuff that you do, like play soccer, for example, is a big thing in big cities.
Yes.
And here it's also a decent thing, but like and then also like just being able to step away from your work. That's an important thing, because in a big city where there's a lot of that's not how I saw it, actually. A small city, less distractions, but you need those distractions to keep yourself sane. Because when you work, like I love my work, and when things go wrong at work, I take it very personally. It like takes me, yeah.
Yeah, it can derail you, especially as someone who's very invested in the problem. It's not about just getting it right, but like I don't know how to explain it, but like you're invested in trying to solve this problem, and there's a point of frustration that happens, and sometimes it can derail your mindset for a couple days. Um, and what I was going to add to your thing is the one thing I like about the city is yes, there's diversity, but like in that diversity, you can talk to different people and you gain different perspective. It shifts your perspective a little bit too sometimes. And in that shifting, it could also shift your mind and put your mind in a different space to look at your problem from a different angle. Or it could just be the opposite where it just takes you away so far away from the problem that when you zoom back in, you're like,
Mhm.
oh, let's just try this.
Yeah.
All right.
And no, yeah, it does put things into perspective as well. Like this is not end all be all. When you're alone, that's what it seems like. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that relaxation
Yeah.
does a lot for you.
Mhm.
Okay. So it was different.
Mhm.
I definitely feel that because
Yeah.
I'm coming from Philadelphia all the way over here.
Wow. Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that I miss is the food.
Mm.
um, I feel like I underappreciated all the food or access to food that I had there. And I'm not saying there's the food desert out here, but like as far as culturally, the
Mhm.
diversity in food can be limiting sometimes.
Oh, no, you can say it. I think people won't feel too bad.
But one thing I keep hearing is that this area is growing even from years ago. It looks a little bit different. So I think there's some big hope for Purdue in the future and its development. All right. So, I guess, I jumped into chemistry and I'm about to jump into chemical engineering. But how do we go from deconstructing things to chemistry?
I would call it like destiny, basically, because the thing is, like, you make choices and you do things thinking that you're gonna, like, you try to force like an outcome of your life, right? But you can only do enough that you can control, and the rest parts is what, like, where you're gonna end up is also decided by like what.
Absolutely. Yes.
So essentially, although I like deconstructing things and I like science, I like anatomy and all that stuff. And then when you're in Ethiopia, the most respected profession is when you become a medical doctor. And then, I mean, still to this day, my parents, my uncles, all that stuff, they're set on me being a doctor. They're telling me like, oh, drop out, get your master's, go and become a doctor.
Do the MD, PhD,
Yeah,
right?
they were telling me that, and I kind of understand where they're coming from. I think the stability, the, like, social status that comes with a medical doctor in Ethiopia is much so. So
Well, just to take a pause there, is it that, or is it also what they're exposed to and what they know? because engineers I think are just as respected, and over here. But like, what do people know? There's no engineering show really. There's Grey's Anatomy,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
ER, all these types of shows,
Yeah.
medical shows, or The Good Doctor, and that's what people are exposed to. And so when they think of STEM and they think at the height of it, they think a medical doctor. And so, that's part of this the podcasting here too, is to gain more exposure, because I think students don't know that you could be something other than a medical doctor. And in a field where it's highly saturated, like so many people want to become medical doctors. And because so many people want to become it, it's scrutinized a lot, and so therefore there's only a small window for people to actually become medical doctors. And so sometimes you set yourself up for failure, because it's like become a medical doctor or fail at life. And so therefore there's other avenues out here. So that's why, I think it's important to share your story. But as you can keep going about chemistry.
So I guess becoming I mean, so when I was younger, they let me be whatever I want. Told them I want to be a pilot because I like planes. I like things that like take apart. And they're like, no, 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 no. That's too easy. You should be an astronaut. And I'm like, and then for like a year, so I wanted to be an astronaut because I wanted to go in space and do all that. And then, you know, and then when I become like, an adolescent, I kind of see what they're coming from. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be about a doctor. And then, so I studied really, really hard. And there's like this university entrance exam that we had to take during my high school. And in my country, we have that. Uh, and also before, like I was like entertaining the idea of coming here. So I've taken like the international one as like the SATs.
Sure.
And I got decent scores on that one, but I was like, okay, I'm not getting a full ride scholarship with everything paid for. So I guess I'm not gonna, step out. So, and then I like was set on staying in Ethiopia and becoming a doctor. And then, I took my exam, and then there was like some chaos in the country where the exams were like being stolen and like being put on like, social media.
Oh no.
So we had to postpone our exams by a month. And so basically that gave me a time, not one, to study. Two, I was like, this thing is seeming uncertain. So let me try to like take the going to the United States more seriously. So I applied, got my visa. And then actually the end, like, so I had my university entrance exams. And at the end of it, I had my visa interviews to come here. So I was like, and then when I first sat down on Monday to take my first exam, I knew I was going to do well. I literally like looked at the exam and I was like, okay, this is going to bang. So now I don't want to go to the United States. But my parents were like, we paid all this money, you're going to go. And they took me to the embassy. I did like, we went and did like, I did my interview. I didn't want it like that much, but I did like, I don't like failing. So I did the proper interview and I was stressed for it in the early, so I prepared. And they gave me the visa. And then like, they're like saying, oh, but like your exam scores, we don't know. So we're not going to let you stay. And even if you stay, what if there's an instability and they send you to a different region and then you're going to have problems? So you're going to fly. So we bought the tickets. I said bye to my friends. Cried my eyes out.
I would have too. Oh man,
and I got sent here and I'm like, okay.
Because a month before you thought you were staying.
Yeah. And then, I mean, it's like something that like everybody wanted to do as well, to leave the country to come to a different one.
Right.
So once I flew, the day of my flight, like, once my flight lands, like they're telling me, yo, your scores are out. And scores, you got like, I think, so there's only 100 people that got, so 700,000 take it, I think. And above 600, there were only 100 people. And I was one of the 100 people that got above 600. And there was like, I mean, my school is pretty good. We had like, I think 5 of them from like on. But like, yeah, so above 600, I think I don't remember exact score. I think it's like 602 or 600. But yeah, so I got that score and I'm like, yeah, take me back. I'm going to go back. And then they're like, no, you're good. You already left. So, and then it was a bad culture shock as well. But like, since then I was like, okay, I'm going to do medical degree, medical doctorate. So I'm just going to keep doing it. So I started off as a pre-med in bio, took some chem classes. And I'm like, what's bio? And like, it's nothing to me. I want chemistry because I like understanding the deeper side of things.
I agree with that. I think, and I didn't get to share this in my interview, is I think the medical field also interested me as well until I started doing bio, and I was like, I like chemistry better. Um, Not that there's anything wrong with like STEM if you're doing bio out there. It's just more so that I think we went down on a deeper level, I think, and understanding certain properties. Same properties that are in biology, but like you go a little bit deeper in chemistry with.
Yeah, I think chemistry has a good combo with like physics, which is like basically the fundamental, and like thermodynamics and all the fundamental part of,
And I think you're articulating it a little bit better than me. I think that's also why I liked chemistry as well. Is you know we didn't explore that physics or that thermodynamics too much in my earlier stages of biology, and that's why I was like, But biology is still interesting. But I like the chemistry, I like the physics, I like the engineering side of
yeah,
things.
exactly. Yeah, it's still, I mean, I'm a biochem since I started. I mean, I like biochem, all that stuff, but knowing like there's a different law that's basically governing small things. That's a very interesting, like the
That's a good
quantum.
way of
Yeah.
putting it.
So, and then like there's a law that we see and everything interacts with each other. But, and also, I had really great Gen Chem teachers in my undergrad. Oh, I like both of them were really great.
Yeah, I will say that like you're I think there needs to be more emphasis on the freshman year because like a good teacher in one area, they can sway your whole mind of
Yeah.
where you're going.
Yeah.
And so like having a good chem teacher, I think and I think if you had a good bio and not a good chem teacher, I think it might have swayed your mind differently too. So I think those beginning years are very crucial, very important
Very, they're like
to swing the direction where you go.
the support you had as well, not just the teachers, but
Mhm.
what are the other people that were there? Yeah.
Mhm. So did you do like some internships or things that like kind of kept you kind of feeding you into this direction?
Oh yeah, that's exactly. I mean, I wouldn't put it in any better word. Literally, they fed me towards here because so sophomore year took my chem classes. I switched over, I think, second semester of freshman year, or either like sophomore or so. Yeah,
Pretty quick. You were on it. You were like,
almost, yeah, I'm out of here.
yes.
And also, there's like some elitist type of, not elitist, but like we're like a select few people that just graduate in chemistry. I think in my class had like 20, whereas bio has like 100, because everybody wants to
There
do.
was like two in my class. Like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, there's definitely an elitist thing.
Yeah,
Like,
so
there's
I was
not
like,
many
yeah.
people. When you graduate with a chemistry,
Yeah.
you get written down in books because there's not many.
Exactly. And I'm like, this is pretty nice. I mean, it's a smaller. But yeah, so I did research for like the Ethiopian professor. I actually, when I first did my research, like, so I didn't really know exactly what I was getting myself into. But uh he kind of offered me, a position, like he's basically a paid position. He gave me a stipend, and then he just told me what to do. I never really thought about exactly what we were doing. I had to like go back and, because I have to put it in my resume, so I have to go back and relearn things.
I will say that, yeah, at that stage, I was in that phase of just like, oh, I got a job.
Yeah, same. I was like, oh, this is nice. I'm gonna do research, and
Right.
then he took me under his wing and explained to me. I was the most senior student in the lab at some point, and I literally knew nothing. And that kind of, and then I used that to apply to an internship, and like I'm gonna give them a shout out because I mean they're gone now. It was they're working on a wearable device, like to like use sweat for like med monitoring. So if you have like analytic, like analytes like cortisol or other drugs and hormones in your blood, you can analyze them using this sweat sensing. That's what they were working on, and I applied. To be honest, I was late for the interview. It was a mess, but I think I made a good impression, and they took me there and kind of like work with me, and I had a chemist job, but I saw the chemical engineers, help them, work with them intimately. So and like although like I wanted to work there in the real, like, yeah, I mean, if they had an offer, but it was too early for an offer because I did it I think my junior year, so early on my junior year. So, and then after that, I was like, okay. Even during the internship, I was still set on this medical school idea. So I was doing the internship stuff. There's some times where like I put like my laptop out and study for the MCAT.
Mm-hmm.
And I even took the MCAT while I was doing the internship during that summer.
Mm-hmm.
People supporting me. Some of them were actually graduated, but they're still doing the MCAT because
Right.
they use it as a temporary job. And I got I did the exam, and I even went through the application process,
Mm-hmm.
but that was my draw. Me, I hate debt. I'm scared of debt, so I was like, I'm not gonna go to school.
Yes.
If you're gonna pay me, I'm not gonna. It's if it's paid for, I'll go for it. And then so I only applied to MD PhD programs, and then there you have to convince them that you want the PhD as well. It's
Yeah.
hard to do so.
Yes.
And I think like I applied to like four, and then it's expensive. Oh,
Very expensive.
yeah,
Very
medical,
expensive.
and I applied to like
Talk about debt.
yeah.
That's some real debt, right?
No, even just applying, it's so. I think.
Oh yeah, the application process, all that, and just to not get it too, still.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't. I think I got like one wait list, and I didn't get any even interviews. So I was like, okay, my So it's one of the things where like I'm thinking of forcing my destiny, but my destiny is not there. So I was like, okay, I was talking to my other advisor, and he's like, okay, so what other options? He's like, why don't you just do a PhD? Why MD PhD? Just do the PhD then. And I'm like, okay, what do I do my PhD? I Google. He's like pharmaceutical sciences, maybe. And I was like, how much they make? Google. What else did I like? Oh, I like chemical engineers. I saw how they work. I like it's basically the same thing. Yeah. So
Right.
so let me just do a chemical engineer. I looked up how much they make. I was like, okay, definitely. And then I went like, so I now pulled up the graduate school rankings, and Purdue was like, I think top 10. Yeah. And I just went by that list and I applied.
I think that's a good way to go about it. I think shoot for the top and fall somewhere. No, I think that's definitely an awesome story. I think some people think sometimes, pursuing your wherever you land is this more methodical process. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and it doesn't work out that way. You kind of have to. I think in a lot of your story, you're showing that you were given certain things, you were thrown certain things, and you learned to take advantage of it. COVID-19, I think, is a decent example of that. You could either be crushed by this dread of COVID-19, or you can figure out how to take an advantage of it. And I know as a grad student, I think I needed a breather a little bit.
Okay.
Because I was, getting the PhD was a little bit overwhelming, but like because life slowed down a little bit, it kind of eased up for me, and I took advantage of that time. I didn't just kind of use it to panic. I used it to get more work done. I used it to take a different perspectives of my project. Just like we were talking about before, you get so absorbed into a problem, and then it kind of locks you in, and you just get frustrated, and you can't see anything but failure. So it allowed me to take a step back and then breathe and relook at the problem from a different angle. All right. So we're in chemical engineering. So what are you doing now?
I guess,
or is it hush hush?
No,
Can we not talk about it?
Talk about it. I like talking about it. I talk to my Uber driver about it.
I do the same thing. They're like, "Ooh, tell me more."
Exactly. I'm like, and then they give me ideas. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll
try that.
That's not actually a horrible idea, random man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I do. So I'm a chemical engineer, but so I work with heterogeneous catalysts. And catalysts are used in industry to make a reaction. So to make it in very easy terms, to make a reaction go faster, to make a product. So
yeah, I got to remember that people listening may or may not be chemical engineers, right? Yeah. So let's break it down a little bit.
Yeah. So it's basically, I think it first started with this lighter that it had like in the 1800s. So it's like, I think a platinum metal, and they use it to like spark up hydrogen that creates a flame. And I think that's what, I don't know exactly, but like
the old school lighters is what you're talking about. Yeah.
So they had like this, so it's been around for years, centuries, and it's been, like it's responsible for big things, small things, bad things, good things. So the Haber-Bosch process, where like we got ammonia, that's from a catalyst. So basically, like I work on studying those type of materials, and I'm trying to just understand the fundamental active site behavior. Like, what's the fundamental behavior of these catalysts? What are they? So how do we, if you understand something, you know how to apply it and like use it better. So it's basically like, what's the science governing them? What can we do? What cannot we? What can we do? What's possible? What's not possible? Yeah.
Okay, so is there like a trajectory of where you're trying to go with it?
So more of like, without getting into too much details, it's like there's this old reaction that's been around for centuries. Even the guy, or I guess this professor that discovered the reaction and the intermediates, uh, has won the Nobel Prize. And I think his student, like, he was a professor here, and he also won a Nobel Prize. I think, yeah. So there's it's an old reaction that's known, and we know a lot about the reaction. I'm applying it to understand this catalyst that like is being used in, like, to abate pollutants. So you can use it to convert noxious gases into harmless gases.
Yes.
You can use it to upgrade hydrocarbons, like
Okay.
natural gas, into something valuable, like plastic precursors or even hydrogen,
Okay.
and or like even liquid fuels.
Okay. So yeah, I think like understanding this reaction could possibly help us change harmful substances into non-harmful
Yeah,
substances.
basically like use this old like knowledge that we have about a reaction and apply it to the catalyst. And like, how does the catalyst respond, or how does the reaction changes to like changes in the catalyst? And then like that will tell you information about the catalyst, and which will take and apply it to like where it's used. So essentially, like, I'm trying to use old tricks or old knowledge to get new information about something. Yeah.
Isn't that the secret sauce of being an engineer, right?
Yeah.
we don't do we do new, but we don't like, right? Unless you're like a rich person, you can do stuff like Elon Musk. He can do something that's never been done before. But we as engineers in the field, we have to use old stuff that works really well, possibly Nobel Prize from, and see if we can adapt it and apply it in a different way
Exactly.
to solve a different problem, things of that nature.
Yeah, you start from where you know. So every time you create, there's always, no matter how hard the problem is, write down what you know. So this is what I tell my students. Whenever you're given a problem on an exam, if you feel very flustered, start by writing down, what do you know? Do I know the volume?
That's exactly what I used to tutor. And so that's one thing I used to say. It's like, whenever you don't know anything, what do you know? Well, I know the distance. All right. You may not know how to use the distance yet, but let's list down what we have. And then from all those things, now we have probably a list of equations, and now we have relationships that we can kind of build from here. And it's like, well, how do we get to force from distance and all these things that we know? So that's pretty cool. All right. So you are getting your PhD. You're going to do chemical engineering. Are you trying to go into industry, academia?
Yeah. So
I'm still trying to figure it out.
Like, I'm trying to do the same thing as my like previous. So I came in now. Like earlier when I said like I wanted to be this and forced my fates, but I ended up coming here. Right. I tried to be a doctor, and I ended up becoming a PhD student. So now I'm doing a different approach where I'm letting life guide me. So I'm doing everything that's available for me. So if there's fellowships that are available to become a professor, then I'll do those. There are like internship opportunities that are available, I'll do those. And I'll just like let life guide me towards whichever direction.
I think I agree. All right. I'm going to be, I'm add some controversy here. Okay. So I agree with that notion, but I'd argue that your trajectory to being a doctor led you here. All right. And so therefore, let's say you didn't have a trajectory. Do you think you still be here? And I say, arguably so, probably not. Right. If you had that same mentality. So like the point is to be flexible, and that you were. You didn't like let life discourage you because this door didn't open. You found another way. And I think that is the art of life. You might think that you know what you're going to do. All right. And life, it changes the trajectory of your path. And it doesn't and if you it like what's the saying? Shoot for the stars, land on the moon. I think that's the kind of concept there. But if you never were shooting for stars, how would you ever reach the moon, right? Now there could be some luck into that and like divine intervention. However, I do believe one, being open to all opportunities, like I'm a big fan of that. Like I wouldn't be here at Purdue if I wasn't flexible to be open for opportunities. I never planned to be here at Purdue as a postdoc, but in shooting for my destiny, I'm finding other paths that are open to me. It was never my intention to build this podcast, but here we are. You know what I mean? So, um, I think sometimes it can be discouraging because like how we see it is that I shot to become a doctor and I didn't become a doctor, right? But where you're at right now is not so bad. And I'd probably argue you're probably happier than you probably would have been as a doctor. So therefore, I don't think there's wrong to shoot. But if it's hard for you seeing that you go for something and you land somewhere else, then yes, then maybe you try to be flexible. But I think, you know what? Engineering is really cool for that in the sense that you might be working on something and you might be frustrated because something's not working out. But you could see failure because you're not meeting this particular goal, but you might be learning something else that might help you develop a different set of technology.
Yeah.
Right. So you might be shooting to do this one thing that you're trying to do and learn that the catalyst is actually good for something else. And you're like, you might be frustrated and you're like, man, I spent all this time doing this. But wait, can we use what I've discovered for something else? And that would be just as big. Right. So like, I think as engineers, as people in this world, I think it's nice to shoot for something, but be flexible to pivot if need be.
Yeah.
That's just my little controversial statement.
No, I mean, I agree with you 100%. If you just don't if you don't have a goal or a plan, then you're just gonna be like a ship without a compass. You're just gonna be floating.
You might spin in circles. You might be going in circles the whole time.
So you aim for a direction, and normally like the thing that you aim from. So I'm a big believer in what you say. Like you're not necessarily. So I am happier here. Like that's. I mean, I don't know if I would have been happier, but I know I'm happier here. Like, and I know I am passionate about what I do. I can't guarantee if I went and did like whatever I was doing there, I'd be passionate. And I don't want to call it luck. I think it's destiny. So I like came here and this, like it's sort of, so what I was trying to say earlier is like, I don't really have a, like, I don't want to be like, I want to be a professor and then I want to like, do the professor route and I'm not going to like, open up. I'm open to industry. I'm open to industry, like, even national labs, but I would let my work guide me. So if there's an opportunity to become an intern that would help me to go into industry, I'll do it.
Absolutely.
I'll apply for it. If there's an opportunity to become some postdoctoral fellow at a respected person's lab or something like that. I mean, I'm also like, it's just
and I think what you're saying that, and we're both saying, is you're flexible.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I think being rigid and not being able to be flexible, I think is the downfall of a lot of people. You got to be willing to pivot when the situation dictates, if there's a better opportunity, then there's a better opportunity. And, I'm not sure if I'd be here if I wasn't flexible. My intention was not this trajectory that I'm on right now. My intention was something completely different. I'm not sure I'd have been happier, but I am happier here where I'm at right now. I feel really accomplished, really happy of where I've come so far because of that flexibility. It wasn't even my intention to do the research project that I wound up doing for my Ph.D. I think I wanted to go into something else entirely, either bioimaging or biomechanics. And then I went into diagnostic devices and I loved it. It was I loved and hated it. Let me just be honest with it. Sometimes your research is they were asking me, how'd you come to love engineering? I was like, well, I think you're crazy if you love engineering all the time. I think it's a love-hate thing. I said, but I think you wind up loving it more than you hate it.
Mhm.
But it definitely is frustrating sometimes.
Oh yeah, like, and that's also, so you see me saying like, oh, I'm happy where I am. It's happiness is not the only thing. I'm satisfied. I should say that.
Yes,
Because the
that's a good one.
happiness should not drive your life. Because if you want to be happy all the time, one, you don't know when you're happy because you're always happy. Two,
That's a fair point.
it's like you don't have the contrast in life, so you don't try it for like it's. I like being uncomfortable sometimes, so I like love when I'm comfortable. So like it's, and then I think that gives this PhD gives you that balance. Sometimes it's too much, like where oh, like this is something that they don't tell you when you join. Like
There's a lot of things they don't tell
they
you when
don't
you
really
join.
like it's. You need to hear it
It's a
from somebody.
secret.
That's why I'm a big supporter of this podcast, because
Thank you.
if you don't hear it from somebody, I mean, preferably somebody that has the same experiences as you, you're not gonna really know what's going on. Like you can have an idea and then you come here and you get surprised. So that, and then yeah.
And I think the surprise, some people roll with it and some people don't. They're just like,
Exactly.
this is not what I signed up for.
Mhm.
I thought it was going to be roses and sunshine, and it's not that, you know? But I think if you know what you're getting yourself into, it can be a little bit easier.
Yeah. And also like hearing about the experiences of others. So I think it depends on, like, the type of person you are as well. Like it's like the whole PhD experience, and like it depends on what you value as a person, what your philosophy. It's literally a philosophy doctorate. So your philosophy in life is gonna appear. It's people do science and you come here you thinking you're gonna do science, but really you're gonna do science and
Develop your philosophy.
exactly.
And I think that's a really important take there, is that you're developing your philosophy. So when you do your research, you got to shine through that. When you defend, you are still shining through your research. Your philosophy is being developed along this path. I didn't go into building my diagnostic device and thinking about racial bias too much. I was just like, this is a problem. And then like my philosophy, my mind kind of opened up to a bigger problem, to a bigger understanding of what was going on in my field. So I think that's a really impressive way of talking about it. So one of the things that I'm noticing here, and this is a new segment that I'm trying to add to the podcast, is a special segment that's where we tackle not only just giving perspective, let's tackle some challenging problems in our community. And one of those topics that I gave you, that you selected, was diversity in STEM. So we both know that, when it comes to minorities in STEM, it's very limited. And what we mean by that is it's not saying like there's no black nurses. There's plenty of black nurses, but how many black engineers do you know? How many black doctorates, PhD doctorates do you know? Or doctors, there's not a lot of those things, right? And there's these questions at the political scene where they're asking, why do we need to promote diversity in these areas? And, so what I wanted some of the guests to come on, I mean, I can weave my philosophy into here as well, but I wanted some of the people coming on as guests to discuss why they believe diversity is important for STEM, why we need it.
So I will try to answer for engineers at least.
Yeah, no, and this is you.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a lot of people, and so a lot of people are going to give their perspectives. But I don't want my philosophy just being pushed down people's throat. I want everybody to know that there's other people that have different perspectives on.
Yeah, no, that's definitely. But like for engineers, so engineers solve problems and they anticipate problems and solve them, and also they solve existing problems. And to solve a problem, you need to understand it. Like you need to know, fully like what the extent of the problem is and like how it manifests. So if you have a non-diverse body of engineers that come from only one background, they're gonna be able to solve problems that come from their own background, but they're not gonna holistically solve a problem that like benefits everybody. It's gonna be focused and from the perspective of one side. But that's not the reality. Like when you have like the diversity in real life needs to be represented in every field. So like the work that's being done is representative, or like, all the problems that are being solved need to be representative from the.
Right. So you're saying like increasing the perspective here, um, like for instance, I believe seatbelts in cars were built in mind with a man's build, and those test dummies, there weren't women test dummies, I believe, and some people believe that's the correlation with um, high accident rates or fatal injuries with women, because maybe they weren't included in those diverse settings and being a part of the solution, finding of the solution. And I think that's a great way to tackle this thing. Engineering and I think STEM in general, like I think different perspectives, if I'm shorter, I'm seeing something from a different view than you are. If I'm taller, I'm seeing things from a different view, right?
Yeah.
But if we have all tall people or all short people
Yes.
on a problem, they're going to give you the best idea they have. They're not trying to exclude the other parties. They're just thinking about it from the best way they see the problem.
Exactly.
All right. But sometimes it's hard to have a very dynamic view or just wide range view of everything. And so I think you have a great point there. I think diversity, I think can only make the solution better. Now, I think there's a thing that's too many cooks in the kitchen. That's probably true too. But I do think, those perspectives do need to be a part of the solution process, period. And if we're engineers, that's what we live for. We live for solving the problem and solving it well. Nobody wants to build something and someone come up behind them and build it better, right? you want to do it right, and you want to do it like the best it could have been in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, having a diverse group or being in a diverse setting is what helps those things, I think, as well.
And also, you can always
try. It inspires an idea too.
Exactly, like you can solve it from the perspective of like, okay, like I can try to like put myself in your shoes and try to solve it there, but it's not going to be the same as myself like going there and solving it, so like it's representation is really key for like figuring. So if you want to make the world a better place and that's your goal, then you need to make it a better place for everybody, right? You're not just you, like, your people.
Yeah, right. Right. And I would go to say that diversity in STEM is only great for everybody. Like even if you want something to be great for your culture, I think diversity is only great. Or STEM is only great when we have diversity in it, is what I meant to say. Cool. So the next question that you said is like, so like there's not a lot of engineers. There's not a lot of doctors. There's not a lot of there's so many pharmacists, black pharmacists, all those things. I don't have the CDC numbers. It's not the CDC. I don't have the numbers on me for where minorities rank in percentage wise into other black people rank, but we are pretty low. I think those numbers are 8% or at best 11%. I think I want to say that the last time I looked at those numbers is 8% of STEM that we participate, and that's including everything. And you go to engineer, it gets even smaller. I think it's like 3% of engineers in America are black. So, what do we need to do, you think, to like increase those numbers? Do you think it's an inlet thing? Do you think it's an education thing? Like, what do you think we need to do as a community, as a culture, to inspire better growth in STEM field?
This is one of the things that you're always faced with when you're in this type of setting, because you're like lonely. But I think so. I'm gonna try to like shift over to like another metaphor where like
I'm for it.
So when you start forming a crystal, you need a nucleation event, and then all the crystals gather and then like make a big crystal, right?
Yeah.
So we don't have, to make that nucleation event, you need to have surpassed certain concentration, or like you need to have the species enough to make that like event happen. So like we can. So I think it's more of a domino effect where we don't have enough yet to for us to grow. We're not surpassing the need, like, the amount of people that would need to start this exponential growth. Because if I'm honest with you, the reason I'm still in STEM, or the reason I'm in STEM, is because, one, I saw people in STEM that look like me. I saw it is never unreachable. At any point in my life, I was like, well, I'm probably like, I can be a doctor. I can be an engineer. I never really was like that because I had somebody that was that already, that I know personally.
Nice.
And this is not true for like a lot of people.
Absolutely. It's definitely not true for me.
Exactly. And you need enough of people like me, or like people like you, that are like gone through the people, and then like, that like expands. So now at least they like, we know Brandon, Dr. Smith.
Yeah, and that's why this podcast is kind of started with that in mind. But to your point, that crystalline species, like not enough of us. What if there was? But the problem is this. So you were exposed to it, right? Which means you had an environment where you had access to them. Our environments are not filled with that. And so therefore, to your point about the crystalline forming, if there's not enough of that species, it's probably forming, probably smaller than like the microscope to see, but it's very slow, whatever. But once you get enough of that species in that area, whatever, like that, there's a threshold or a point where this just kind of exponentially starts to go off, right? And so I think there needs to be a greater coming together. I'm not sure what that looks like or what that needs to be. There needs to be a greater coming together. And I understand that could be difficult. Everybody has different motives and intentions. But when you can come together as a community and give this community like fulfillment and with like all engineers and doctors and all this other stuff, I think that's where the multiplication of more engineers, more doctors can happen at a faster rate. But when you are in this little town, Carmel, Indiana, and I'm in Oregon, and I'm like, we're just separated. Like we start our own silos, but like it's going to take even longer to grow those communities, right? So at some point, I think we got to kind of come together as a community of people so that we can kind of like give exposure to the next generation so that they want to be an engineer. They know an engineer. They've seen an engineer. And that's what this podcast is supposed to do. It's supposed to give the ability for people to hear and see people that look like them. So this podcast is to reach, undergrads, graduate students, post-grad, and, high school students and so forth, because I want them to see from an experience and exposure. I'm hoping that we grow into something that, we can get more things on here. So like, we can get like more, green screen, and we could show like those crystalline structures like you're talking about there.
Yeah.
Because I can see it in my mind, but I have the experience from being a chemist. And it makes sense to me. But there's going to be some kid that's like, I don't understand what they're talking about.
I mean,
But this is a start. And I think, as we come together, I think we can do better, and we can have people know that they can do something because they've seen it before. I think it's hard to know that you can be something when you've never seen that. And I think that's what other cultures sometimes have over the Black community is they have doctors, they have engineers that look like them, maybe not even in their immediate family. So that's not what I'm saying, but it may be in their, and just seeing them on TV, seeing them in different settings, you see Iron Man, he looks white. You don't see a Black Iron Man looking guy person. So like, you may not think that that's even possible, and I'm not saying to like appropriate, like make a Iron Man Black, but I'm just saying that they need to experience people in those roles to know that they can be those things.
Because if I say, and like, certain things that we see Black people in, like, like say basketball player, your immediate thought is like of a Black person. If I say a musician, like normally that's so.
And there's no doubt, in some of these kids' minds that they could be a football player, they could be a basketball player.
No, it can also be.
There's probably doubt in their mind if there's a sport where it's primarily focused on a different culture, and then you're like, yeah, I can't do that.
Yeah. But if I say president, I mean, okay, president is a bad one.
Right. Because
And that was especially, yeah. So I guess, like, okay, let's say if I say you're not gonna picture,
or the King of England.
yeah,
I'm not gonna pick a black person, right?
Bro, yeah, that would be crazy if you become, yeah. But if you say like doctor, engineer, things like, those flash words, the things that you picture are like somebody that's not black, and then the more you have those, like, I think it's exposure from a higher scale, like, in pop culture and all that stuff. You're influenced by like what you see, and you're not, yeah.
Or even just what you're exposed to. Like when you go to the doctor, you see a black nurse and you see a white doctor come in. Those things program your mind a little bit. Even teachers, which is why some people, you can find more black teachers here, because they were exposed themselves to a black teacher. I was probably a black teacher that made them wanted to become a teacher. You got to really be on a different playing field where you want to be something that you didn't see growing up and continue to do it. I do think people get here as a freshman, as a sophomore, and they're like, I want to be an engineer. And they get here and they're like, yeah, this is not for me,
Which is fair as well. Yeah.
But I think it's because I think you got that added support in your mind that the people who are engineers don't look like me. And then when you go to the classroom, you're the only one. And you're like, it also supports the idea that you can't do it as well.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, though, I wanted to open the floor. This is a little different. You are a grad student, so therefore you may or may not have questions. But if you have questions, what kind of questions would you like to throw back at me?
Well, I would say, like, I've been thinking about, okay, what can I ask him that will benefit me and everybody else?
Sure.
So I think hindsight clears a lot of things up, right? So I would say, like, I'm a grad student. I don't have any publications yet, right? Okay. So I'm still trying to like figure out this story, and things can be frustrating. But so I was trying to say, like, one, like looking back now, how do you, like, what would you fix exactly? Knowing, like, what would you look out for? What would you change? Or how do you approach different things? And then, or like, how would you have done things differently?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part is, like, as a graduate student and, like, just as a scientist, as an investigator,
mm-hmm.
You're not just doing investigation. You're also dealing with like a lot of politics and your own beliefs and, like, human problems, right? When it comes to like interacting with people around you. And that's normally, like, it's one of the things that, like, is not advertised when you join a PhD. It's not advertised that you're going to have to navigate people's emotions, people's attitudes, people's work habits, and the idea that you think they have of you, the idea that you think, like, so those things, like the human side of things. Like, how do you manage that human side of things? And, like, what is, like, how do you, I think it helps to know, like, how do you manage the egos, like, the different egos that you have that could be creating issues, or, the different people around you. How do you?
It depends on how those issues are being created and what the impact of those issues are. So, like, it's hard to say. If I'm generalizing the issue, I guess what I'm saying is this. I'm a very mission-oriented person. And so, like, my mission is my PhD. Because that's my mission, what do I got to do? That means I might have to work with a knucklehead or somebody who has an attitude or who has an ego or likes to operate this way. So to some degree, I try to be flexible because this is not about me. In that sense, it's not about them. It's about the goal, and the goal is to get the PhD. So I can care less about, their feelings or my feelings about the issue. I got to work with them. And then I also got to understand how long I got to work with this person. I might have to work with this person for a long time. And I also got to think about who cares about that person's ego or they're hard to work with. No one cares. No one literally cares. Like, if I go and complain to my boss, they just want the job done, And I think it's also, if you become a person They can learn to deal with different types of egos. That actually becomes a strength on your CV because everybody's going to, no matter how strong, the technical research you did was, at the end of the day, they're going to be like, so can you work well with others? Can you give us a story? And it's nice having a story and just being like, listen, I had a person. This is their type of personality. These are the things they did. And it was very frustrating. But this is how I figured out how to work with them and get the job done. That's an impressive thing. All right. Because whether you're doing this here at the graduate level, you're going to experience that in industry. You're going to experience that in academia. There's no way you get to a job where everybody's just happy and it's just good environment. It's like, oh, can I use that machine after you? Yes. Can you make sure you clean up the mess after you're done? Oh, yes, I'll do that. No, it doesn't work that cleanly. All right. There's always that one, at least one, if not many people that is a little bit difficult and challenging to work with. All right. But I see it as this is my mission. This is my goal. And you're not going to stop me from getting there. Now, I'm not saying I got to be nasty or rude to you, but I'll smile and shake hands, do what I got to do to get my job done. Okay. Now, if the problem's a little bit more complicated than that, then I would need to know more specifics on how I would deal with those things. But
Yeah.
and then also have outlets. All right. Sometimes you just need to vent. All right. Go out with friends, grab a drink, or if you don't drink, get some food and vent. Let it out. Move on to the next day. All right. I think it's very important not to build it up on the inside because that's when you explode and you explode at the wrong time. And everybody's like, why are you mad over a pencil?
Yeah.
You're like, no, this guy stole my pencil. I gave him my pencil. He never gave it back. And everybody's like, here. Yeah. You're like, it's not about the pencil. Yeah. So like, I think it's important to make sure that you get a chance to vent to friends, get to like people, a trusted group of people that you can trust and you can share your frustration. Sometimes they give you perspective and they're like, oh, what if they were having a bad day? What if this is triggering them? What if this is that? And sometimes it's like, I never thought about it like that. Because sometimes the way you feel about a person is not necessarily all about them. And I told a friend, I said, imagine you're the happiest that you've ever been. You're happy. When somebody cuts you off, I don't know if you drive.
Yeah, I do drive. Yeah.
If someone cuts you off and you're happy, just imagine like you're happy. You're through the moon, happy. How mad are you? And you're just like, go ahead, man. But imagine you're the angriest you've ever been. Okay. That same person cuts you off now. What you're probably going to do some obscene gestures. You're going to honk your horn. You're going to be aggressive. You're going to probably want to speed up on them or whatever the case may be. So I'm not saying what the person did and cutting you off was right. I'm saying that your emotions aren't checked because you're emotionally compromised. Okay. So sometimes your frustration in your own research, the things you got going on, how overwhelmed you feel influences that person's actions as well. All right. So sometimes you really need to make sure you're doing your best to decompress, and step away from the research sometimes. And I'm not saying for a long period of time. I'm not trying to get nobody in trouble.
No.
I'm saying like a night, go get a drink, or like for me, I like to go get a massage. All right. Those things just reset me. And then I'm ready to go back and play and do what I got to do. So really take care of your own body and mind and spirit. And when you do those things, when you are dealt with people that are a bit more challenging or difficult, you might find different ways of how to deal with them. Okay. To your next point, not being published, things of that nature. I think writing, trying to write my first paper. Imagine, say your experiment goes off without a hitch, then you're ready to write your paper, right? I think starting to write your paper really starts to formulate your mind. Writing early. Because no matter what paper you write, the background has to be the background. And the background still will be the background regardless of the results. The background may shift and change a little bit, but the background still will be that. So, Newton's law is not changing. So like you're still trying to formulate your story. As you try to formulate the story, what you'll be forced to do is you'll have to read. What you'll be forced to do, you have to cite. Also, what I like to do is in trying to write, like since the mission is trying to write my first paper, I have to read other people's paper. So what I look at other people's paper is this. I try to, from an engineering stance, deconstruct how they wrote their paper and why they wrote their paper. Their work is published. That means a lot of people who reviewed their work believed that it was publishable. And so you want to go for the heavy, you want to go whatever journal you're trying to publish in. Those are the articles you're looking for. Because different journals have different thresholds for what they accept. So if you're publishing in Nature or whatever the field is, you go to that field, you read that paper. And I try to deconstruct their points because when you write something, like almost every line, every paragraph has a point that they were making and they were building to their case. And I'm not saying that you're going to do the exact same thing, but you're going to do something very similar. You're going to build your case very similar to how they built their case. And so you're finding papers that look like some similar of an area of a flavor of what you're trying to publish. And you're going to try to simulate how to write your information, and trying to write those things, those sections out, you're starting to bring your brain into focus and you're starting to very cleanly think about the problem. All right. If I had started writing sooner, I think it could have I think it could have sped up my PhD a lot faster, to be honest. I think we tell students to read, but sometimes you don't feel like you're reading it's like reading without like a true purpose in mind. Like you're just randomly reading and randomly attaining information. But I think what you should tell people to do now instead is to write. Tell them to write. And in telling them to write, they force to read anyway. Okay. Because you can't figure out what you're going to write in that first sentence, stuff like that, because they're going to need to be citable things anyway. So you're going to have to read to figure that out. So I think that's the part. I never knew how much writing I got into engineering because I didn't want to write. And then one of the things you do as a PhD, you write a lot.
Yeah.
Yes. And a lot of proposals and things of that nature. I would tell, I think one of the practices I want to do for my lab is write a paper, write a proposal. All those things force you to focus your thoughts a little bit more. If you think about who you were as a undergrad, your thoughts about chemistry all over the place. All right. But now you're not finished yet, but as you start to kind of focus in on a research and on a topic, you become more focused and pointed in your delivery of this information. You're not there yet, because if you were there, you'd be ready for your PhD to defend your dissertation. But as you get there, you start to become more narrowly focused and very clean about the information that you're speaking on. So writing, there's no better way than writing. And I like to also do this. I like sharing my writing, sharing my presentations with people who are not in my field. The people in my field understand me. So therefore, they don't need me to be perfect at it. They can make the jumps in their minds of what I'm trying to say. But the people who have no idea about my research, they have no clue about what I'm talking about. So I like having people in my corner that are non-STEM related because they help focus my thoughts in delivering the story to people. Oh, and my last point is something that you already do. Share your research with everybody. Find an opportunity to talk to different people about your research because they're going to question you sometimes in different ways that you've never been questioned. And it's going to be like a little game or challenge to figure out how to deliver this information, which is important to someone who may not understand it as well as you do. I think that's really important, but you already do that. You already talk to people. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I think. See, this is also why. I had to come here. Didn't have to come here to listen to this, but yeah, this is definitely one of those things that not just the advice, but also the reasoning behind the advice is very good. So I think like I can tell somebody like up until my point what I did to come here, but I still need like the extra gaps for the future to get for myself, you know? So I'm pretty sure, yeah, I really appreciate the advice. And that's also what I was looking for because, like, you know, it's really important. Like, you know, when you come to, which is what I'm trying to do as well. Uh, yeah, I felt like, so I had to do my prelim this spring in February 21st. So for that, you have to submit a proposal and defend and all that stuff. And I think we have to do 2 exams and 1 defense in my program. So the first one is the qualifier. So if you assume a qualifier, like, you know, when I was walking into PhD, I was basically a toddler, not even a toddler, like an infant. I didn't know anything. That brought me up to being a toddler.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say like this experience, the writing part and like defending of like my preliminary exam, that brought me up to becoming an adolescent, preteen on my field.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna keep growing. There's no end. So
Absolutely.
I think, so I really valued the experience of writing and like forcing myself to like make a story. It was very painful. There's a deadline, all that stuff. And it's a huge high stakes exam.
Absolutely.
So that's exactly like, I was like, okay, so that helped me. So like I wanted to carry that into my new, some of that learning part into my new, you know, so into my new toolkits that I'm gonna use. So I'm trying to write, even though like I don't know if the thing is already publishable yet, but I'm writing whatever I have for now. I'm like, okay, let me write it down and like have it like a story.
Absolutely, because what'll happen is it may not be useful per se, but parts of it might be. And then the practice also, because I don't know about you, but writing sometimes takes a long time to kind of like formulate your ideas and thoughts. And so, therefore, I think if you're in practice of always trying to formulate your ideas and thoughts, well, then it may not be as challenging. Right. And same thing with talking. Like, if you need, the more experience you have with talking, the easier the words will come to you. But if you're not talking to many people all that often, and you're forced to do a presentation, the thoughts are going to take a longer time to develop, right? So I think regardless if you use all of it or some of it, or none of it, that writing is still important because it puts you in the mindset of methodically thinking through delivering a message. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's all about. I think engineering or PhD at its finest is really fancy storytelling. All right. And your stories the way you tell your story and the importance of your story needs to come across, you know? So like people need to feel like this is a very important story and they need to feel like this is a well-crafted story.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like watching a movie. Maybe you're watching a 4-hour movie and they spent an hour looking at grass and you're just like, what are we doing here? Right. So like, that's how I think about it in my head. Like you don't want to waste too much time on something, but you don't want to put too little. You got to make sure you have just the right amount of time that you talked about something, just enough time that you had action sequence and just enough time that you had time to develop the ending.
Storytelling is also a big part. Yeah, it's like you need to drag your audience, whether it's a written story or like spoken story. You have to feel like you have to take them through a scenery of your mind, like and like how your thought process, and then it might not necessarily be obvious. So it doesn't need to be sequential on how things happen. It needs to. It depends on the story you're telling. So
Certain
exactly,
information is important and certain information is not. And so you got to learn what to cut out.
Yep.
Like when we see a finished movie product, we're not seeing all the things that they recorded. We're seeing what they thought was the best version of the story. And so certain things were left out.
No, definitely. You have to leave out things, you know, maybe like, oh, I'm going to revisit these things. And like, this is very crucial. So that's the thing. PhD, not all about science. I'm telling you, there's more to it than there's
I think you explained the best. It's the philosophy. I think that's more so about it, developing your own philosophy. And even then, after your PhD, you'll learn it's only the tip of the iceberg. There's more development that you can go through. And it depends on if you go the academic route or industry route. I do think that shapes things a little bit for you, but there's even more growth to go through after the fact.
Yeah. No, you'll never end.
Exactly. Well, I wanted to tell you thank you for being on the B-Xcellent podcast. And I want to tell all the people that are listening out there to like, comment, subscribe. I really heavily say comment. Your comments will influence what we do in the future. I want to make sure everybody that is listening to the podcast is enjoying the podcast. If there's anything that we talked about that you want to hear more about, just send those comments or send me a direct email. I'll make sure that's linked in the bio for the YouTube or any other website that we're posting. And also, I just want to thank everybody who's just been on this train, and for our future Ethiopia followers that we're going to have too. Feel free to comment and subscribe, and I will make sure that we keep doing this. I think this is truly important. And catch us on the next podcast. Thanks.